Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Sue Hoxie, and I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance. The VHSA is partnering with the Vermont Department of Health, Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, Agency of Transportation, AARP Vermont, and UVM Medical Center to bring you this webinar. Today, we're presenting the first in a three-part series titled The Road to Mobility, Keeping Older Drivers Safe, Mobile, and Independent. Today's content is focused on the caregivers and loved ones who support older drivers. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. Please mute your microphones during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in your Zoom control panel. We'll leave some time for questions at the end of the presentation. So before I share today's agenda with you, I'm going to launch today's first poll. So the question asks, what is your primary reason you're attending this webinar today? So please select the appropriate response and click submit. Okay, I'm now going to close the poll and let me share the results with everyone. So looks like the majority of you are here because you have an older driver in your life and you want to learn more about the resources that are available. Okay, let me turn that off. Okay, so here's the agenda for today's meeting. We'll give you some background on the challenges faced by older drivers and their caregivers, recognizing risks to them and other motorists, having the conversation with the older driver in your life, and lastly, the various resources and assistance available in Vermont. So let me introduce you to today's subject matter experts. You'll hear from Tiffany Smith from the state's Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, Allie Breyer from the Department of Health, Sarah Benis from UVM Medical Center, Doug Masson, a volunteer from AARP Vermont, and Linda Bowden, the state president of AARP Vermont. So now let me turn the podium over to Tiffany.
Thanks, Sue. To begin, I'd like to quickly review some of the language that you'll hear during this presentation. When using the word older adults, we're generally referring to the individuals who are age 60 and older. And when discussing the importance of driver safety and transportation alternatives for aging road users, let's recognize that we're all aging and this issue applies to all of us. Next slide. As of 2020, Vermont was considered to be the fastest aging state in the nation, and as an aging population, Vermont agencies, leaders, and policymakers must prepare for the unique needs and challenges faced by older drivers in our rural state, especially when it comes to road safety and preparing our state to be more livable, walkable, and public transit friendly. Next slide. Driving is important to many of us living in a rural state and for aging road users. Older adults have been driving for most of their lives. Losing or giving up a license is an undeniable sign that an individual is at a point in life where they may be needing more or different supports to continue living independently. Most people rely on driving to ensure full independence, and aging road users are no exception. They want to hold on to that independence for as long as possible. Many alternative transportation options cannot be easily used by older adults. For example, some older adults experience challenges walking to a bus stop. Alternative transportation systems often require advanced reservations and may serve only disabled or low-income adults and may only cover trips for medical appointments. Older adults may be reluctant to ask for as much help as they need, which could impact their quality of life. Next slide. It is also important to note that most older adult drivers are very safe drivers. Older adult drivers are more likely than younger drivers to use a seatbelt regularly and follow the rules of the road. They're less likely to be distracted drivers. Their years of experience in handling different road and traffic conditions are invaluable. Next slide. Additionally, drivers age 70 and older have higher crash death rates per mile driven than middle-aged drivers. Higher crash death rates among this age group are primarily due to increased vulnerability to injury in a crash. In 2021, almost 20% of deaths and 17% of injuries on the Vermont roadways were among people 65 and older. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Allie. Thank you.
Great. So as Sue mentioned, my name is Allie Breyer, and I work for the Vermont Department of Health as an information director. And I'll be talking about how normal changes that come with aging can impact our ability to drive safely. So not only are crashes more deadly as we age, we may also experience changes in vision, physical fitness, and slower reflexes, which could cause safety concerns. Next slide. We also may have certain medical conditions. Sorry about that. Certain medical conditions or take prescription medications, which may impact our ability to drive safely. And it's really important to be aware of these aging related conditions that could cause physical or cognitive changes, could impact your driving abilities in the future, or maybe are already impacting your loved ones, friends, neighbors, or other folks in your life. Some of these conditions include stroke, diabetes, peripheral neuropathies, arthritis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, some heart and lung diseases, glaucoma, macular degeneration, and loss of peripheral or night vision. It's important to note that a sudden onset or change in any of these could result in a crash. Next slide, please. Additionally, there are certain medications which could affect our loved one's ability to drive safely. This could include certain pain medications, sleeping pills, seizure medications, muscle relaxers, anti-nausea, certain types of eye drops, blood pressure and heart medications, and really any medication that could cause drowsiness, dizziness, blurred vision, or muscle relaxation. And if you have questions about these, it's important to talk to your loved ones and see if they can talk to their healthcare provider, or if you're able to do it on their behalf and they'd be okay with that. You could also speak to a pharmacist and they could answer some of these questions about these types of medicines. Next slide. And so I want to emphasize that, again, not all drivers over a certain age are unsafe drivers. We really need to be thinking about skills and health conditions rather than age. But as we age, and we're all aging, we need to be aware how and when changes to driver safety occurs, identify at-risk drivers in our lives, be willing to have hard conversations and share concerns, and be willing to take action and provide resources to make roads safer for all. Next slide. So how do you know when it might be time for folks to give up the keys? It's important to recognize and look for risks and warning signs. Next slide. And some of these things you might want to look for are multiple vehicle crashes or near misses or new dents in the car, 2 or more traffic tickets or warnings within the last year, or increases in car insurance premiums. Comments from friends or neighbors about their driving, anxiety from the older person about driving at night, health issues, as we mentioned, and certain medications, complaints about speed, sudden lane changes, or actions of other drivers, and recommendations from a doctor, a physical therapist, or the DMV to modify driving habits or quit driving entirely. So I'm now going to pass this off to Sarah. She's going to talk about how you can have some of these conversations with loved ones, friends, neighbors, especially after you've witnessed some of these warning signs. And we know these conversations are really difficult. And so Sarah will be here to provide some helpful tools and tips to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Allie. So my name is Sarah Benis, and I'm an occupational therapist and a certified rehab driving specialist, and I work at the driver rehabilitation program at UVM Medical Center. I think now we were going to start up a poll, launch poll 2.
We are. So we want to gauge the audience, whether you've had these conversations before. So again, please select the appropriate response and click submit. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you for sharing. And it looks like looks like the majority of you have had the conversation and it didn't go so well. So let's turn things back over to Sarah.
Okay, well, hopefully maybe this webinar today will give you some tips and help with some of those in the future. For many families, having an older parent or relative behind the wheel can be a source of stress or worry. The topic of driving can be incredibly difficult to bring up. Often a family member may push back when expressed that there are concerns that are expressed, but it makes a lot of sense. There's so much wrapped up emotionally in driving. It's a sign of independence, can be a source of identity and self-worth, and there can be many lifetime memories associated with driving. Also, in a rural state as Vermont, it allows for independent access to the community, offers freedom and flexibility. So the idea of no longer having this form of independence can understandably generate some very strong emotions. So what are some steps we can take or considerations we can make to have this discussion or addressing this topic go smoother? Next slide, please. So the first step requires collecting information, and this is usually done by a family or a member or friend to collect information about what is specifically happening with the older driver. So this may include some of the warning signs that Allie discussed earlier, as traffic incidents or tickets, possibly more anxiety with driving, or showing physical changes as slow reactions or falling or just having a change in a medical status. So this process can take time and may require gathering information from a variety of people who have opportunities to observe the older person driving. Different people too may have different contexts and seeing different types of activities, but also just may provide different perspectives. So word of caution, it's not uncommon for families, caregivers, or friends to be wrong in their judgments of a driver's risk or driving ability. So that's another reason it's helpful having other input. A person's driving performance, not their age, is what determines their fitness to drive. Next slide, please. So next you can start to make a plan based on observations that have been collected. So think about sitting down to talk with your loved one to help determine some of the following questions. Is the person driving safely within acknowledged limits of his or her capabilities? Is there a problem that is it correctable? Do other transportation options need to be identified? So choosing the right time and place is very important in having this talk before it becomes too late. So thinking about talking and bringing up this topic early on. So it's important to avoid crashes or possible injury rather than avoiding discussing unpleasant topics. So you may also think about this as less as an intervention and one big meeting and discussion, and rather smaller, more frequent conversations can help to lay the foundation for more serious conversations later if safety is a concern and actions need to be taken right away. So you may also want to choose, think about who a trusted family member is that would be good to have this conversation. Next slide, please. Stopping or limiting driving may bring out emotions as being depressed, angry, or frustrated, feel like a burden to family members, or feeling socially isolated. So in order to have successful conversations, you need to understand and validate these feelings of your loved one. Encourage your loved one to share their feelings even if they are angry. It's important to realize that these emotions can be directed at the messenger, but it's more generally related to the message. So here are some just communication tips to help keep the discussion as positive and productive as possible. So you want to think about avoiding use I messages rather than you. For example, you may say, I'm concerned about your safety when you're driving, rather than you no longer are a safe driver. Stick to the issue. So discuss the driver's skills and not their age. Providing real specifics can be helpful. Listing very specific situations, like, the time I saw the dents in the car, or very specific driving incidents. Focus on safety and maintaining independence. So be clear that the goal is for the older driver to continue the activities he or she currently enjoys while staying safe. Offer to help the person stay independent. For example, you might say, I'll help you figure out how to get where you want to go if driving isn't possible. Be positive and supportive. Recognize the importance of a driver's license to the older person and understand that he or she may become defensive, angry, or hurt, or withdraw. There are many online resources, as the one listed in the top corner here from AARP, We Need to Talk seminar. It's a very helpful and free 4-module seminar that can offer more tools and tips for preparing for these kind of conversations. Next slide. So following through with the plan, this may be a plan of less driving or possibly no driving. Be tuned in to your loved one's sense of pride and loss. The decision to give up driving can be emotional and difficult. So a transportation plan is necessary to help keep someone active and engaged in life. Next slide, please. So with following through with a plan may also require addressing alternative transportation options. So as you're prepared to address driving with your older parents or family, it's important to be prepared to discuss driving alternatives and solutions. How will they get their errands done, make their doctor's appointments, visit friends, maybe go to the salon? Before the conversation, equip yourself with information about public transit options or driving services in the area. And this responsibilities too may be spread out between family members, friends, in addition to local transportation resources. So if you're in need of finding out some of these options in your area, contacting agencies as area of aging or age well offices, they often have case managers that are very helpful in identifying local resources in your area. Or case managers, sometimes even from a primary care office, can be helpful in identifying those types of services available. So in addition to alternative transportation supports, there are also resources to help support caregivers with these tough conversations and decisions around driving. So you would not be alone if you're thinking my loved one is not listening to me, or just feel too uncomfortable to approach the topic or unsure. Some individuals may be experiencing a medical condition as dementia and lack insight into their impairments, and this can make discussion incredibly challenging for a caregiver to have. Driver rehabilitation programs like the one I work at offer comprehensive driving assessments to evaluate visual, cognitive, and physical skills, and we can render opinions, objective opinions, if someone is at an increased risk of crash. So we can further guide plans for continued driving with possible restrictions or independence, or sometimes help with counseling for driving retirement. So these services can help at times family feel not so caught in between. So we're here to help make that process easier. In my experience, individuals that have been evaluated by a program at times have an easier time transitioning to driving modifications or retirement if they've had open discussions with their family and concerns ahead of time. Now, thank you very much. I'm going to pass the presentation over to Doug at this point.
Hey, Doug, if you're talking, you're on.
Yep, I'm
great.
sorry.
No problem.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Masson, and I'm a volunteer instructor with AARP Driver Safety. AARP Driver Safety has been educating seniors 50 plus for over 43 years. The classes are 4 hours, 6 hours, in 8 hours. In Vermont, the class is a 4-hour class, and all classes have the same content. The only difference between the shorter classes and the longer classes, it gives the participants more time to ask questions and discussions. The AARP driver safety class costs $20 for AARP members and $25 for non-members. Each attendee receives a certificate of completion, which is valid for 3 years. This certificate may provide a discount for your automobile insurance. Your automobile insurance company is the one to make the decision whether the discount is applicable or not. AARP driver safety classes are for older people, and we call it the smart driver class. It's either taken online or in person. As an instructor, I would prefer that people take it in person, but that is your choice. In the course, you will also learn about important facts about the effects of medication on driving, how to reduce driver distractions, how to maintain a proper following distance with another car. In the state of Vermont, it's a 4-second rule. We don't measure by feet anymore and miles per hour. Proper use of seat belts, airbags, anti-lock brakes, and new technology, which is found in all the cars that are coming out today. Techniques for handling left turns, right turns, and roundabouts. Age-related physical changes and how to adjust your driving to complete these. The class is a very relaxed class, and all learning materials are provided. We talk about changes as we age and how it is important to have a driver's license. Just imagine going and not having a driver's license tomorrow morning. Where would you go and how would you get there? AARP also has a free program called We Need to Talk, which has been mentioned in this program. This is for individuals who have family or friends who need to have a conversation about their driving. The important thing is to treat them with respect and to give them your ideas and treat them with fairness. Your driving techniques and safety is the most important thing to our family. All information is research based by MIT Lab and the National Driver Safety. Another free program is called CarFit, where the team of instructors fits the person to the car. The person who owns the car does all the adjustments, not the instructors. Today and into the future, new automated vehicles are coming online, and they're going to be the norm. Remember that the person behind the wheel is still the one in control and has the decision-making ability. Safe driving on our highways and byways is important. Now I turn the program over to Linda. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Bowden. I am the AARP Vermont Volunteer State President. So let's continue thinking about some of these resources, because these are really important and things that you want to pass on either to your clients or to those that may need this information. There are driver rehab programs where OTs, occupational therapists who are specially trained as driver educations, can help drivers get safely back on the road again. The Vermont DMV has a mature drivers area where they keep mature drivers on the road as long as possible. And they're very positive in how they approach this. And as Doug said, the purpose behind this is to make our roads a safer place to drive. And then AAA also has a road-wise driver program. This is similar to the AARP program, but it has a little bit different kinds of curriculum associated with it. So many different kinds of resources. So now what I'd like to do is, Sue, would you put up the third poll question for us? Great. So what alternative modes of transportation do you currently have available in your community? This is multiple choice, so please click whatever choices you'd like with regards to this. How are we doing with that, Sue?
Great. I think we have answers from the majority of folks. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results.
Great. Oh my gosh. Great. Walking and biking are right there. That's awesome. Family and friends. Public transportation. Great. Excellent. Okay. We'll close the poll. Can we go to the next slide, please?
We sure can.
So in addition to walking and biking, and I want to go back to that just a second, because there were a lot of you that submitted that as one of your answers. When Allie and Sarah both talked about the sorts of changes that happen with adults or our seniors, consider the fact that if you walk and if you are riding a bike, you can prevent or stop, or well, I can't say it will eliminate, but it certainly will help with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, arthritis, and some cancers. And I'll get more into that in the next slide, but take a look at these other options too. There's Ride in Sight, which provides information about senior transportation options in local communities through the US. Vermont Public Transportation Association also has mobility choices for seniors. And if you dial 211, the database they have is amazing and has detailed descriptions of programs and services available to Vermonters that are provided by local community groups, social service and health-related agencies, government associations and organizations, and others. Next slide. So here is just a chart of the things that CDC says are long-term and immediate goals that you get from exercising just 30 minutes a day, with walking, which is what they consider an entry-level form of exercise. These kinds of things can help your body and keep you mobile for a long period of time. So always consider that as another transportation option for you, to walk or to bike, in addition to the other kinds of things that we've talked about in our seminar today. So at this point in time, I think I'd like to turn it back over to Allie, and she's going to hold the question and answer period, in addition to mentioning that resources will be available to everybody.
Great, thanks, Linda. Yeah, we will be sending out a resources list of everything that we did today, plus a recording and the PowerPoint. So you'll have all of this information. And we do have a couple more webinars coming up. I will pass it actually to Sue. She'll kind of leave time. We have time for questions and conversation.
Okay, great. So thank you, everybody. So here are a couple of questions, and speakers, feel free to jump in wherever you think is appropriate for your subject matter expertise. Are there more in-depth resources available to learn about how to have these difficult conversations?
I guess I'll jump in here. I think, well, I would definitely suggest the AARP, starting there. That's a really great resource. I think too, you know, online, there's tons of information out there. Talking to a primary care physician too, or other members of the medical team, can sometimes be a good start too.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
And what should you do? Sorry, did somebody else want to comment?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to pop in. I also think it could be helpful to do some sort of practice conversations with, maybe other family members or friends, just to get a sense of how you are sounding when you're having these conversations. And it's good to just kind of get that feedback before you talk to the older person.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allie. And what should you do if these conversations don't go well? What should I do next?
I think that could be a very reasonable expectation that it might not. Again, you could consider other resources if you're kind of hitting walls of considering something like an objective outsider, like a driver rehab program, to do an assessment that might have a different perspective. Or again, talking with the team might help too. That's one idea. Possibly maybe even a different family member approaching the situation.
Another idea is we recommend that if you're concerned about your driver, have them take a driver lesson with a qualified driver instructor and let that instructor do the evaluation. It keeps you out of the evaluation process and they get an independent person who is not involved. And that does work.
Yeah. So with driver rehab programs too, there's an in-clinic test, but then it's also an on-road assessment as well. So that can, and often we allow people to be in the vehicle, family members to be in the vehicle with us too. So it's a great point, Doug.
Okay, so here's a related question. And I think we have a partial answer to it. So can you refer older adults for for driver retesting if you're concerned about their driving?
I can speak for our program that all we would need is a doctor's referral to the program.
Yeah, and I'll just add that if you can refer them to the DMV through that mature driver page. The thing with that is if you don't have the conversation with them and you just refer them, as part of the sort of hearing process, they will find out who referred them. So it might be good to have that conversation before you go to the referral route.
I
Very
agree,
good
Allie,
point.
thanks. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Okay, and one of today's attendees is asking, do we still have a little booklet about those difficult conversations? So I don't know if that was an AARP product.
Yes, we still have the booklets. They're in limited edition right now. So the best way I would recommend to get them is to go online to aarp.org and see if you can find them there.
Yeah, and I can take a look around and add it to our resources list after the webinar and see if I can find something like that.
Okay, thanks. So here's another question. Do you have any resources to assist those older drivers, assist an older driver who has already had their license revoked but are unwilling to give up their keys or cars? Note that the license was revoked because the doctor and OT determined they were no longer safe to drive.
Well, from my understanding, there's an appeal. Every person has an appeal process that they could complete through the DMV. So there could be a medical recommendation for a medical suspension, but that they can, every person has the right to appeal that with the DMV.
Giving up your driver's license is a very, very difficult task. I've had people who have come to my classes and have been recommended to be reevaluated and have gone and been reevaluated and their license has been suspended. But the difficult thing is they still continue to drive. So it's something that you have to be aware of. They still will not give up their driving, even if they have a license or not.
And Doug, do you think that, it sounds like Lisa, who had mentioned this question, this maybe maybe they want to speak to it, but what would you do in that kind of situation if someone really isn't giving up their keys? You know, it'd be difficult because you might have to call law enforcement. That feels difficult too. So what would you suggest?
A
Do you
very
have any
difficult
ideas?
issue. It's a very difficult issue. And you have to remember, if you call law enforcement and report somebody, that person has the right to know who made the complaint about them. So you have to be aware of that. It's a very difficult issue. On one of my We Need to Talk programs, a lady had lost her husband in his late 50s due to cancer. And when they took his license away, he very openly said that it was more difficult losing his license than getting the diagnostic for cancer. So it's a big issue with people.
Allie, I was just going to chime in quickly to this question. I mean, I won't get into the difficulty it is to really know that somebody could do harm to themselves or others by continuing to drive when they're not, when they shouldn't be. But I do want to say that there are resources in community that perhaps could be provided to this individual that might limit their driving. So look into having, if they're driving because they need groceries, look into things like grocery delivery or meal delivery. Maybe if they have to go to the pharmacy, I mean, why are they so insistent on driving? And it could be the independence piece, and likely is. But if it is something that is a barrier to them receiving, you know, medications and going to the pharmacy, look into the options, and you can find out different ways to bring services into the home that could at least limit their driving. And you can find that out through your local area agency on aging or senior community center. But that could be kind of the reverse engineering of some of this issue, is to bring some things into the home that's keeping them off of the road, feeling that they have to go out and get services.
That's a great point, Tiffany. Yeah. And I think this can happen too when people even considering different living situations sometimes, because they can be very rural and remote, and it's really hard.
Great, thanks everyone. Let's see, I'm just looking. So, okay, so let's open the floor up for discussion and storytelling. So if you're interested in participating, you would unmute yourself and raise your hand. And why don't we throw the question out there of if you've had successful conversations with older drivers, what worked well? So again, if you want to help answer that question, just unmute yourself and raise a hand.
Sue, I would be willing to participate. I can't find my hand raised.
Go for it.
But I'm willing to, if anybody has a question, I'm willing to participate in the conversation.
Yeah, it seems people are shy on this one.
Okay.
So yeah, please share.
Sue, do you want to take down the deck and just open it up to viewing the participants?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Well, I can share from my personal experience that I've been very fortunate to not have these conversations. My mother was probably 85 and had neuropathy in her feet, and decided one day she couldn't tell whether her feet were on the gas or the brake, and she just handed the keys over and said, "Here, sell my car." So I've been extremely fortunate in that way.
Well, I feel in just the context of my job and work, I'm on a daily basis having all different types of conversations. And I do think, you know, with my practice now, even if I'm seeing a senior driver that has the potential to continue driving, we already start that conversation really early of just kind of thinking ahead. And we like to call it driving retirement. just kind of thinking ahead for those things ahead of time. And that can help to just, make that process a little easier. But sometimes, unfortunately, we can't, it can be just such a tough thing sometimes. And I think active listening is the best you can do sometimes, because those emotions are real and warranted. And sometimes you can't fix it because it's just so unsafe, but you can listen. And I think, like Tiffany had mentioned, just try to fill those gaps of what driving had offered, either socially or just accessing the community to help.
So Tiffany, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to share an experience that I had where my grandfather was exhibiting those risk signs. We were noticing dings and bangs on the car, and he and my grandmother were living together, still independently, and it was hard. Took some time for my family to realize that there was risk there, because my grandmother, who had macular degeneration, was essentially using my grandfather, who had judgment issues, to continue to drive them. And so we approached it very sensitively and tried to do all of the correct interventions by, providing them with delivered meals and kind of breaking up caregiving tasks among our family. However, at some point we did have to be so bold to remove the car. And it was a challenge. And it was really defeating to my grandfather, who didn't quite understand and see himself at risk. But that was the decision that we made as a family. And then, kind of had to move into other supports. And it was challenging, but that was a decision that we made as a family together, to actually just remove the vehicle and deal with the consequences of having to explain and put those other things in place. It was difficult for us as well as them, and kind of losing their keys. That's all.
Sorry. You would think after 2 years we would know to unmute ourselves, right? So thanks, Tiffany. MV791. Sorry,
Sorry. Karen with At-Risk Driver Program, Oregon DMV. One of the things I'm wondering about, I personally have not had to deal with this, because like you, Sue, I had the great fortune of my mother recognizing that after the car had sat parked for 6 months, because she just wasn't driving, because she did have alternate transportation and didn't need to get out, and fortunately lived in a retirement community. So the social isolation that can happen oftentimes when you lose your mobility was not a factor for her. But I'm wondering, because I had a different family member with a different issue who didn't have individual transportation, so needed to avail themselves of other resources, but the fear of the unknown was holding them back. And the way that I addressed that with that particular family member was simply to go with them. Well, let's take the bus to go do X. Not would you like to, but just saying, let's do, and then going with them to do it. And it took several times like that. But once they got comfortable and saw how easy it was, and it wasn't unknown anymore, then they were okay with doing that on their own. And I'm wondering how much of that, it's incumbent upon friends and family to help with the transition, just not in the conversation, but in activities. My 2 cents.
Great, thank you. So did anybody else have something they wanted to share with the rest of the group here?
Hi, Sue, it's Mark. Rather than just lifting my hand, so we have a 92-year-old mom, so she's pretty fit. I think cognitively, I think COVID has taken a toll, and because she hadn't really been driving much for the last couple of years, even though we had a concern before, it's a little bit more heightened now, and so I think we've had kind of like dance around conversations. So this is kind of why I'm here. I am going to share this with my family, but I think there is a certain amount. I think I heard earlier it's not really about age; it's about ability. And she always has this reaction that a year younger sister is still driving, and her family isn't questioning anything. So I just kind of wanted to share my situation.
Thanks.
But yeah, but I think yeah, the period of time that she hasn't been driving, you know, for the course of the pandemic has become an issue, I think.
Mark, I'd recommend you go online to that We Have to Talk AARP. It's got such great little videos and scenarios that are up to the times. So it's really helpful, informative information along those lines to do it. My personal issue with my mom was she had driven into a telephone pole because she was reaching down to get something. Her purse had slid off the seat next to her. So she was fine. She was fine and laughed about it. And I live up here in Vermont. She lives down in the state of Georgia. My brother lives in Florida, and my other sister lives in Alabama. So having family around was not an option for her. She depended on friends. And we tried to have those conversations with her and, you know, seeking other alternatives. But she finally negotiated with us that she would only take back roads and only to church. And so we all agreed, okay, if you do that, we'll go along with it, but nothing else. I don't know if she followed those rules, but that was the first step anyway, in her recognizing, because she had to pay for the poll, that there was a problem there. So, you know, maybe they'll come to that kind of conclusion on their own.
Well, she's already had an incident where she was late in the evening, turning into a gas station, you know, facing west. I think she was blinded by the sun and ran over a small sign over a curb, and that was just before the pandemic. But you know, she's a dragon boat racer. She's the oldest dragon boat racer on the team, and I think that kind of gives her the sense that she's okay.
Yeah.
I think she's going to be a little limited. You know, she took time off. They weren't racing for the pandemic, so I think she'll find that she's probably going to be sidelined a lot more. So
Great.
I'll have to add that as a transportation option. I didn't have that.
All right, Lisa, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, and my internet connection is laggy as soon as I put my video on, so I'm not going to share. I've actually had to deal with 3 parents, a father, a mother, and a stepfather. My father, who's 92, gave up his car easily. He, you know, I've had a multitude of events. My stepfather, who suffers from hypoglycemia and had a hypoglycemic event behind the wheel of a car, refused to give up his license. And is actually refusing to admit his dementia and has very little insights. We actually took the car away from him. My mother is 88 with Alzheimer's, diabetes, neuropathy, macular degeneration, and no insights into her memory loss. And she is our troubled child. We cannot get the car away from her. We've tried to take it away. She called the police and said we were stealing her car. It's been a really difficult situation with her. And she's refusing, even though she's the one who has lost her license, she's refusing to give up driving. And we're finding very few avenues to actually, I'm worried about other people at this point, you know, and that's my concern, is real concern about her lack of insight into her issues. And I have a sister who's a physician. We've been trying to do this for 6 months, and it's just, I'm finding that there's very few tools available when you hit this point.
Lisa, thank you very much. That's a very interesting story. And I see it when I give my classes. Folks tell me the same story. And it's difficult.
Yeah. You hit a
Well,
point where
Lisa,
you know,
do
we've
you
tried,
have
we even disconnected the battery. We've done.
I had one lady who they sold their parents' car and the dad went out and bought a new car. So they don't stop. They just
No, they
keep
don't.
going.
That's my stepfather is threatening to buy a new car. And this is the one who had a blood sugar level of 38 behind the wheel.
Oof.
I do
Um,
find too, like the more reduced the insight is, the harder it is, but then the greater the crash risk is, you know, so that's what's so, it's so tough.
The real
Um,
challenge of dementia and driving is incredible, is a very difficult issue. And I'm finding there's very few tools to assist in that.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lisa. Well, I don't see any more questions or raised hands. So, Allie, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
Nope, just stay tuned for all the resources that we'll send. We also are hoping to do in-person presentations for older drivers themselves, older people, hopefully at retirement communities or things like that. And so if you have any interest in that, please reach out to me and we'll kind of try to figure out how we can get something like that scheduled, because we'd love to, you know, be in person and talk with folks.
Great, thanks. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So once you leave today's session, you'll receive a survey and we'd appreciate it if you take a few minutes to provide your feedback. And then we'll also be following up with an email in a day or two with the resources that we've referenced and a link to today's recording that you can share with others. So on behalf of the Vermont Department of Health, Department of Disabilities, Aging, Independent Living, Agency of Transportation, AARP Vermont, UVM Medical Center, and the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.